What's up, everybody? Happy Friday. Shad's out of the office at a hockey tournament with his daughter. So today it's going to be myself, Guap, and Anthony Caniglio will be joining us to talk about what's going on in the sector right now. Off the top, I mean, I know I've been covering it a little bit on Twitter, but it's been pretty alarming, not alarming, but nice to see as of recent, Fox News running a lot of pro-cannabis content. We got the op-ed from Weldon Angelos and Mike Tyson about the shortcomings of the Biden administration and what Trump could do to potentially right those wrongs. Yesterday, there was a segment highlighting Trulieve and Champ Bailey on their partnership in Georgia, which is a market that's actually coming to fruition pretty quickly. I'm hearing that flower could be on the horizon in that market within a decent time frame. And then we had Todd Harrison, which was on with Charles Payne yesterday on Fox Business News, talking about the industry. And paired with the large MAGA accounts on Twitter that were perpetuating a potential breaking executive order that would legalize cannabis that anybody in the know or anybody watching this show should have known was a fallacy. It's just interesting to see. I think there's some social listening experiments going on and sentiment checks that are going on around the MAGA world and around Fox News and the conservative outlets to see some sort of sentiment around cannabis. I mean, we all know the cannabis polls within the majority as far as support goes on a national level. We've seen it poll with a majority in the state of Florida with Amendment 3, even though the amendment didn't pass. So, I mean, if one thing is for certain, the powers that be and the conservative media are starting to, let's say, test the sentiment and the appetite for cannabis. So, I mean, I don't think this is the end. I think this is just the beginning. I mean, I'm interested to see what we see in the next couple of weeks as it relates to cannabis, let's say on Fox News, which has been a sounding board for the opposition as it relates to cannabis progress in the past years. It was, like I had said on Wednesday, it was the main sounding board for Governor DeSantis to launch his anti-Amendment 3 campaign as he was on primetime evening Fox News on a nightly basis running up into the election and using that to rail against the likes of Trulieve and Amendment 3. So it's good to see sentiment shift. I mean, I don't want to read too much into it and get too excited about it, as I'd alluded to in the newsletter this morning. But these are the outlets that Donald Trump pays attention to. These are the outlets that the right-wing conservatives and the politicians that we need to get into their ear are listening to and in tune with. So, I mean, we are getting the message on the right outlets as it relates to this week, and it's only Trump's first week in office. So I'm actually very curious to see where this goes. Maybe it's a little bit of foreshadowing of things to come. But enough of that. Let's actually jump into the headlines, and Guap's going to be joining me for the headlines here today. And then Anthony Caniglio will be coming in right off the top after we get through the DOGE headline. How's it going, Guap? Good to have you back.
Good morning. Yeah, I remember walking through with you guys in DC a couple times and seeing Fox News on every television in a GOP senator's office. So they definitely watch. And if there's ever a president who cares what people are saying about him, it's Donald J. Trump. And I think Todd did a hell of a job representing the industry. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of woulda, coulda, shouldas. And so to condense that all down into a few minutes is we do hour-long live streams, right? For a couple times a week. It's really hard to condense this down into 3 minutes. So I think he did a great job.
It is. And I know that we got the headline about Elizabeth Warren penning a letter to Elon Musk as it relates to cannabis reform and several other things. Come to find out that part of the strategy was to essentially, I don't want to say silo cannabis reform within DOGE, but use DOGE as that medium of, let's say, pushing cannabis reform. This is just another letter by Senator Warren that shows her fundamental understanding for the industry. She understands the plant. However, this is, again, just another data point as far as talking goes. Will this lead to action? I think there's a lot to be determined as it relates to the actual actionable part of Senator Warren's agenda, but this is putting cannabis within the scope of the right people that we need to. We talk about drug reform. We talk about government reform. There are resources that are allocated towards the enforcement against cannabis that are misallocated. It's wasted That being said, I mean, we talk about the DEA and we talk about the government agencies, and I think we lose sight on the government agencies' main function is to increase the budgets within their own agency. So as she alluded to, that we waste hundreds of millions of dollars on an annual basis as it relates to cannabis enforcement. Yes, that is a very good point, but those agencies, as we've seen, are going to do everything in their power to retain that capital. Hopefully, that capital can be reallocated in the form of opioid enforcement, fentanyl enforcement, going after cartels, and border enforcement. There are different buckets that can pick up that slack, and it's not just going to be the withdrawing of funds allocated towards cannabis enforcement that's going to, let's say, deplete the agency of resources that are needed. I mean, what were you thinking about this, Guap? I know that you've been paying
I
attention.
forget the exact mind-boggling number of how many millions have been spent on the war on drugs, but if you add it all up over the decades, it's quite a bit. I don't remember the exact number, but it's hard to estimate how much of that is towards cannabis versus other things, but it's a lot. And so there's been some debate on this channel about, what message resonates with the GOP. Is it public health? Is it public safety? Is it the MAHA? Whatever flavor you choose. But I always like the argument about, like, look how much tax revenue the neighboring state is pulling in, and that you're literally sending over the border. Do you have a budget that needs more money? Like, it just feels like a very easy call to action. Look,
and that state
not going to hit. It's actually, going pretty well for them, and they're able to take that money and reallocate it. So for Warren to take the stance of, hey, Elon, this should be a big DOGE initiative, and Elon's been pretty friendly in some of the tweets we put out on the TDR account, if you look back. It's just nice to see the argument about, you want to save money, you want to make government more efficient. Let's, Warren, just to quote her here, example, the United States have saved hundreds of millions of dollars each year by reducing wasteful spending on federal enforcement actions and detention. Half of states have legalized yet federal arrests for marijuana possession account for roughly a quarter of all drug possession arrests, even though federal sentences for marijuana possession is rare. So stop draining federal resources, cut it out. And we'll see where Trump lands on this. But I think what we can both agree on is, while a lot has been made about acting DEA heads, we'll talk about this in a bit, what they've said in the past, or what Bondi said in the past, or what sign she stood in front of. If Donald J. Trump calls you and says, get it done or you're fired, what do you think they're going to do? So,
and I mean, that's a data point that I've been talking to.
Standing on principle or standing on, I want to keep my job. Let's see what wins, right?
And I mean, that's a data point that I've been talking to a lot of people about. They're of the school of thought of, it doesn't matter what any of these people have said in the past. It matters what Donald Trump wants to do. If Donald Trump wants to get it done, he'll get it done. If Donald Trump doesn't want to get it done, it's not going to get done. It's a very simple calculus. Also, DOGE, just for people that don't know, that's the Department of Government Efficiency. It's an agency that's been spun up by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, who's no more affiliated with DOGE. It's just Elon running the show, as Vivek is going to apparently run for the governor of Ohio, which, to be honest, I think his talents are probably better suited there versus in the DOGE agency. But yeah, it's where they talk about cutting out government spending. It's where we've all theorized that the tip of the spear should kind of start to materialize for cannabis reform, as there is a lot of wasted capital as it relates to cannabis enforcement. Arns, let's bring up Anthony into this, as I know that he's got some takes. How's it going, Mr. Caniglio?
Good. How are you all doing?
All right. Loving the play.
Great. So, I mean, we're talking about what Elizabeth Warren's obviously been doing. She's a friend of the industry for some time now. But I kind of want to take a step back, as you come from the traditional finance world with JP Morgan. You were on Wall Street for some time, and I'm sure you've seen how swiftly Donald Trump has catered and brought crypto to the forefront. I give a lot of credit to the banks getting involved to cause that change. Do you think that we need to get another dancing partner as it relates to the industry, whether it be alcohol, tobacco, firearms, or one of the big boys with firepower in Washington to get something done, to see swift action taken, as we've seen Trump do for crypto, to really get this over the finish line?
Yeah, I think if you want swift action, I think you have to have another organization involved, because this is, from my opinion, I think this is about prioritization. Where does this topic land in terms of prioritization? And the more voices you have that are pushing for change in a more rapid way, whether that's the NRA or the banking industry or the alcohol industry, that's the more attention you'll get. And that's where you can move ahead of other what may be other priorities on the list. I think that's the big issue for this administration.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. It's got to be it's got to be incentivized as well. But I mean, having the banks and having the likes of BlackRock and the institutions behind you really does help you get actionable action from the administration. And then, I mean, as far as the letters from Warren, we've obviously seen these before. We saw them in the last 4 years. How are you kind of, what context are you kind of looking at these letters? Because like I said, we've seen letters before. We've seen her very eloquently explain the trials and tribulations of the cannabis industry, but we have yet to see actual action taken. And she is a quite influential senator within the within the Washington complex.
Yeah, and the banking industry as well, right? From a banking committee perspective, and supervision. For that and for all of these topics, what I'm doing now is I've tried to think about how do we consider each one of these developments. And for 25 and going forward, I'm going to do two things whenever something comes up. I'm going to quantify and contextualize what it means. So when we think about Elizabeth Warren's letter to DOGE, let's quantify it. So what does she say? She says, save money. Sounds great. It's a terrific soundbite. How much money is actually being spent by the DEA on pursuing cannabis related crime, if you will? And so let's quantify that and then contextualize that into not only the DEA's overall budget, but what the DEA needs to go fight fentanyl and what they don't have, but also quantify it in the context of DOGE and what is DOGE going after. And so I did a quick search. Don't rely on my following stat, but quick search was that the DEA's budget was around $3 billion. What percent of their effort is focused on cannabis enforcement that we don't want to continue? We want them to continue to focus on the illicit cannabis market. So it means, okay, stop enforcing against the state legal market. How much effort have we seen against the state legal market? I know there was some stuff in New Mexico. It wasn't the DEA. It was a different group. But so it's
CBP.
Very small. So when you quantify the amount of money, I think it's going to be really small. And then when you put it into the context of what DOGE is trying to accomplish, they're going to say that is way down on the priority list, way, way down. So let's put our effort into something that's going to move the needle. And so come back to your question around lobbying and joining with other forces for those groups. Quantify it and contextualize it. Will they want to join up with the industry to get it done?
I think I'm going to use that moving forward, actually, on everything that I'm doing, to be completely honest, as far as analysis, because you couldn't have been more right. Quantify and contextualize. If you can do that, you can really kind of stress test whatever kind of argument you're trying to make. And it's either going to very quickly be reinforced or very quickly be able to be thrown out. And I think that's definitely something that we don't do enough in this industry, is try to quantify on what we're talking about and how we can actually get there. And then as far as I guess things that we've seen materialize, I mean, I know we obviously have an acting DEA head that's in there, Mr. Maltz. I know Todd Harrison was actually on Fox News yesterday, and then Todd Harrison was also on Twitter this morning.
Great job, by the way. I thought
he did do a great job. Todd, I think, is a great ambassador for the industry as it relates to mass media. But he did also say that he's had a relationship with a gentleman for the last decade. Some of his comments on cannabis, I would say, were a little, I don't want to call them short-sighted, but just not true as it relates to, let's say, things like psychosis, school shootings.
You're talking about Maltz.
About Maltz. Yeah, it's about Maltz, not Harrison, obviously. And then how much are we overplaying how much that do you think that the industry as a whole is overplaying the DEA's role in this, especially as we've seen within the NPRM that the DOJ is going to be the one that ultimately signs off on this, and the DOJ reports to Trump. We know, as we've seen with some of these pardons and executive orders, Trump is going to do what Trump wants to do. And if you don't want to do what he wants to do, you're out. So it's I'm kind of developing the school of thought of it's really Trump saying, get it done to Bondi, and then Bondi just understanding what we need. And to be honest, what we need is not very complex because the work has already been done by the HHS and the DEA. I mean, how are you thinking about the DEA head? Is it just headlines and let's move on? Because technically that really isn't something we can really quantify or visualize.
Yeah,
to use that again.
Yeah, so here's my view. I think it's become a fun parlor game for all of us that don't know really what we're talking about on this regard to speculate. The reality is we have something called the Administrative Procedures Act and the Controlled Substances Act, which promulgate or state very specifically about the process, delegates authority to some people, but maybe the DOJ retains that authority. I think it's sufficiently laid out in that we should leave it to the lawyers and let the lawyers kind of more run the process. My best read is that the DOJ does have the latitude to get it done. But given that there's actual legislative rules in place, I think the people that are in Washington, especially if you're talking about playing by the rules, which is really the new administration's mantra, that making it fair, I think they're going to let the rules play out. I think certainly Trump's going to say what his inclination is. I think the people that are working for the administration will certainly look for opportunities to fulfill what he wants. But the rules are set. And I don't know that I know enough to be able to sit here and say, yeah, Pam Bondi could just come across and do it.
Correct.
Or Maltz is going to get in the way. I think we all have to be ready for it not to happen. So anybody that's building a business or an investment portfolio has to be ready for it not to happen and be excited if it does.
So to harp on that, you obviously have a lot of context within the operators of this industry. What are they doing, or what have you seen that operators are doing, let's say, in preparation for if this kind of stuff does not materialize?
I think it's what they've been doing. Your statement presumes that they've done things thinking it was going to materialize. I haven't seen that. I see people running their businesses consistently with the way they've run them over the last couple of years and not doing anything differently, thinking Schedule 3 is going to happen. I think the folks I know the folks we talk to on a regular basis and in our portfolio, they're operating with the status quo. If they get the benefit of a Schedule 3, then that'll be something that they'll enjoy and they'll figure out then. But I don't see any changes to operations.
Yeah, and then I know we talk about federal reform a lot. It's captivated the conversation. Like I said, you talk to a lot of operators in your portfolio. You have a lot of the grassroots of what's going on in the industry. How do you think, or what are you looking at for 2025 thematically outside of, let's say, the overarching federal conversation that has pretty much hijacked everything we talk about with cannabis? Because I feel like we forget about the state story and other themes that are kind of progressing within the industry and get caught up in what's Trump going to do, what's the DEA going to do, what's the DOJ going to do. We kind of can't get away from that to a certain extent.
I think it's a terrific point to bring everybody back to, Anthony, because that's really where the growth for the industry is going to come from. I know you talked to Charlie the other day. It was a really good episode. Talked to Charlie the other day about Pennsylvania. And so we all hope Pennsylvania would happen, given the limited license nature of that state. That's going to benefit the limited number of people that are operating in that state, right? That's not going to be one rising tide that lifts all boats per se, the way, say, federal regulation would change. I think we all forget about Kentucky. Kentucky has approved licenses. You have a new industry that's got to get up and running in medical marijuana for Kentucky. North Carolina keeps making noises. Maybe I know, Guap, I know.
Slowly but surely.
Yeah, it could be a dark horse. But every year they have that conversation. It seems to be getting closer and closer. And then there are states like Georgia where maybe they'll expand their medical program. I'm making no projection there at all. But you have a really nascent medical program that could expand. And so the states, I think, is really where the action can be. And quite frankly, the more state reform we get, and the more population and more population having access, and the more normalization, the better we're going to be long term.
Yeah, and I mean that corridor I don't think can be talked about enough with Kentucky, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, both the Sun Belt and the Southeast. I mean, we talk about growth in the industry, and those are large markets. Granted, I think if you did an analysis, they'd be dominated by hemp right now due to the lack of access to medical cannabis. But when you looked at Kentucky, for example, I think they unanimously voted on the municipal level for medical marijuana. You have Governor Beshear coming out and actually talking about the problems that we're facing on a policy level with the NRA, and just how cannabis legislation and cannabis regulation doesn't really make sense. He's a very, very powerful piece within the Democratic Party. I would love for him to get louder as it relates to cannabis. And then South Carolina, North Carolina, and Georgia are obviously it's no surprise as to what's going on there. We talked to Nancy Mace about South Carolina from time to time. Like you had said, Georgia, I was talking to someone this morning that believes Georgia is going to go the way of Florida very soon. And you'll start to see that medical market develop into products such as flower and really expand those offerings to put into the hands of patients. And then I would have guessed that Georgia would ultimately be on a collision course for adult use, but I don't think it happens before, let's say, Florida converts. But those are very, very, and then PA, which we always talk about, which from what I'm hearing is very real this time around as it relates to flipping adult use, which we're working right now to have Street and Laughlin on here in the coming weeks to get a real conversation and about face on what's going on. But I do think that the state story isn't really spoken about enough right now, especially as it relates to the investment thesis in the industry, especially when you have Smart and Safe potentially refiling in Florida for the 2026 ballot initiative. I think things could get interesting on the state level here in the coming months.
Yeah, I think and Guap, I know you want to get in here. Just one quick comment. I think one of the reasons people are downplaying the state is because it's not going to move the needle in the near term. It's part of the long-term story. And a lot of people around this sector are really focusing on the near term. So what moves the needle for this year? One thing maybe we could come back to, I do want to get, it looks like Guap to jump in, is hemp. And so the Farm Bill not, being on the back burner now, we have a 1-year extension. I'm really interested to see how do people in the industry either embrace or not embrace hemp to take advantage of that. Separate conversation, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on this, Guap? I know we've been unpacking a lot here.
Is Maltz even going to be the DEA admin? I mean, we talked a lot about his history and what he said and all of that. We don't know that yet. Bondi stood in front of a sign one time. If Trump wants it, I think it gets done. But I think AC is completely correct in that. I just posted a poll on the TDR account this morning saying after Pennsylvania, which I think everyone sort of agrees is probably the next domino to fall, what state's next? And I forgot a couple actually that you brought up, and it's just for fun to speculate which states.
I saw Hawaii was getting some good votes.
The point is
Hawaii's got a lot of traction right now. We were actually supposed to have someone from MPP on this morning from the Marijuana Policy Project, who is spearheading the initiatives in Hawaii. She's actually headed there next week. Apparently there's a lot of traction going on in Hawaii right now.
I mean, talk about a great destination for tourism plus cannabis. Sign me up to go snorkeling on some edibles in Hawaii. I mean, I'll gladly take that assignment if Shad's watching. But yeah, I think, it's a lot of states. And I did some really hardcore population analysis on some previous show where I added up the populations of some of the states that I'm near. If you just add up North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, we're up near Texas's population. And then if you add in Tennessee, Kentucky, I don't want to just start taking over the whole Southeast or anything, but I'm saying it's one big domino, and it's a lot of growth ahead there. And they're starting to see Virginia needs to get their shit together, to be honest with you, because legalizing it and then not allowing rec sales is just.
I mean,
Yeah,
Virginia's
they're years
problem.
away. You need Youngkin out.
Yeah, I was
Youngkin.
gonna say, Youngkin is the problem. I mean, Youngkin sat up there with talking points, and it sounded like Kevin Sabet was literally at the microphone.
Yeah.
Glenn Youngkin, I would assume, has talked to Kevin Sabet, talked to Luke from Smart Approaches to Marijuana. He has his talking points and he has his agenda. Those were the Sam talking points, every single one of them. And they went against popular opinion. They went against facts and data. And Governor Youngkin could not have been more wrong. I think you're completely right, Anthony. There's no way anything happens in Virginia until Youngkin is out of the picture. I cannot wait for him to leave as far as that goes. By the way, speaking of the gubernatorial stuff, I need to correct something. I was actually wrong on the Wednesday episode talking about Byron Donalds. He did vote in favor of SAFE. He was not against the SAFE banking bill. So he is I don't want to say friend of the industry, as I know he was against A3, but he did vote in favor of SAFE. So there is some light there as it relates to Mr. Donalds.
Something we need to keep in mind with all of these politicians is just the two-faced nature of politics. What they believe personally can be completely different than what they have to say publicly for political gain. And that can flip. People talk about, how, just a sign of intelligence is your ability to take in new information and change your opinion on a subject.
We just got a major yikes from Marijuana Moment. I don't know.
Please share. What is the yikes?
This is the ultimate. It's not the message. It's the
delivery.
You say
I plug in here. Go.
All right.
Tom's running a story. Tom's running a story that, and I thank you, Tom, for doing this, because any progress is good progress. If you're watching, I know you've been watching the stream recently. AOC and Ilhan Omar blast the DEA. The DEA head's boomer claims that marijuana is a harmful gateway drug. Now, there's a lot to unpack here. AOC and Ilhan Omar, you could not be more correct. Cannabis is not a harmful gateway drug. There is data to prove it, and it is also used in harm reduction. That is absolutely a boomer claim. But there is a Republican executive branch, there's a Republican Senate, and there's a Republican Congress that are currently installed that we are going to need to leverage to get any sort of reform, which Gretchen is alluding to adamantly in the comments. I might get killed for this comment, but I don't think there is anyone that is more politically corrosive with support as it relates to the partisanship on the issue than AOC and Ilhan Omar. Thank you, but I want to say thanks, but no thanks. I think this is going to do more harm than good, to be completely honest. When you need to talk to John Thune, go ahead.
Back to the quantify and contextualize, right? So if you want to influence Republican leaders, is Elizabeth Warren and Omar really the right people to say things in some way? And AOC, in some ways, they say it and it hardens the opposition. Yeah. Oh, this is a liberal priority.
I like a lot of the things that Elizabeth Warren stands for. I don't agree with some of the things that Elizabeth Warren stands for, but I feel like Elizabeth Warren is respected. AOC and Ilhan Omar, as far as I'm concerned, within the Republican lens, are toxic. Mm-hmm. I don't like what they just. I'm going to let Gretchen. Gretchen's saying what I'm thinking. So I don't think she could be. I don't think she could be less correct with that statement. This is like thanks, but no thanks. I'm curious to see where this goes.
I like people calling out the DA for boomer stances. I don't care who does it. I love it because they're right. And the other thing I joked around, what AC just said made me remember. I would joke around that the best way to get Republicans to support cannabis would have been for the Democratic controlled whoever to come out and say they're against it. Like I almost want it like that old Bugs Bunny bit where yes, no, 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 yes. Like it's
Right.
just the best way to do it is for AOC and Biden when he was president to say, man, we really got to cut down on this cannabis stuff, and the GOP would have been. It just feels, whatever they say, let's do the opposite. But we'll see. This doesn't. I don't think this hurts, or to use Anthony's, quantify and contextualize. I don't think this hurts.
So to this point, Gretchen, I don't agree with you. Republicans have shown a lack of support for us as an industry. This issue is polling on a majority scale in Republican states nationally. We would be willing to we would accept them with open arms as an industry, as individuals across the board, if they were willing to go to bat for us. I have not seen any Republicans willing to go to bat for us, with the exception of Nancy Mace and David Joyce. And I'm sure there's a couple other ones that I don't mean to discount, but the lack of them going to bat for us, or the lack of them willing to listen to us as a whole, has not been shown on their part. This has got to cut both ways, and it's definitely not cutting both ways as it relates to them supporting us.
Yeah.
And I don't think the enemy of my enemy is my friend. That is not true in this case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just not a priority.
So did you see the story about 96? It was a NUG MD poll saying 96% of people believe that the DA is biased. I thought that was hilariously high.
It didn't surprise me.
But
so,
yeah,
the best thing I saw this morning was someone posted it. We also, I think, forget about this a lot. The DEA's function is to enforce the laws, not make the laws and make policy. I think the DEA has been interjected into this whole cannabis conversation as a guiding light to actually make the laws and make policy. That's not their job. They're there to enforce it, which I think that needs to be said a lot more often as it relates to this process and as it relates to their perspective.
Their budget is based on enforcing laws. And so, the fact that the DEA fighting a decades-long drug war still wants it to keep going, like, big shocker, right? Of course they're biased.
Yeah.
Of course,
two
anyone promoted from within.
Yes. Yeah, I'd say one, yes, but to an extent. I mean, the DEA has control over rescheduling. So in that case, they are making it, right? So there's that. And number two, in terms of executing the law, if you go back to the rescission of the Cole memo, the whole push to rescind the Cole memo was around complying with the law, because what the DOJ said at the time was, we're not going to pick the laws that we will enforce and not enforce. There's plenty of directives out there on how to use prosecutorial discretion in where you, as an agency, use your resources. And so, I do hear somewhat of a consistent theme here out of the Republican-leaning administration, not just this one, but legislators in general, which is, let's follow the rule of law. And that's why I go back to my comment about the Administrative Procedures Act and what the rules are. They're going to want to follow the rules. And what I heard in Maltz was, if there's scientific evidence, we'll reconsider it, because that's what the rules say. So it's fairly rules-based. Now, don't think, I don't for 1 minute think politics doesn't put its finger on the scales. Absolutely. But by and large, I think the rules will drive a lot of this.
Yeah, and I think you couldn't be more correct there. And the science is there with the HHS report. The science was reinforced via the OLC. And Gretchen, I know that you're putting a ton of Republican lawmakers that support cannabis and supported safe banking. My statement was more so making statements like what you see AOC and Ilhan Omar doing, going to bat for the actual topic, speaking about it publicly. Brian Mast was great. I met with him in his office. He understands exactly what's going on within the industry. He's for cannabis legalization. He's for formalizing the industry and regulating it. He would be a much more powerful ally to be speaking to the farce that's going on at the DEA right now, the farce that's going on in regards to the rescheduling process. Senator Lummis, if she is a great supporter of the industry, she should be including the cannabis debanking with her crypto rants that she's been going on for the past 24 hours. Now, with all due respect, I'm not trying to discount what all of them have done. Danes has been a huge ally for the industry. Danes has been a huge supporter for banking, but they're not publicly shouting about this as an issue. That needs to happen, or it's just going to fall on deaf ears like it's done for the last couple of years.
Yeah, support versus advocacy, right? It's easy to support when it comes up. You raise your hand and say yes, versus pushing to get legislation included into bills the way Danes used to do.
Correct. I mean, it's that's reality. I'm not sitting up here trying to discount any of them because they've co-sponsored SAFE or they've talked about it positively in certain lights. I commend them for that. I'm grateful for that. And I hope they continue to do that. But until they start speaking, and everybody go look at Cynthia Lummis's Twitter feed, until we get advocacy for this industry on that level to where she's willing to talk about the crypto industry and just shout it from the rooftops, they're not true champions of the industry. Yes, they support it, but they're not willing to openly advocate for it. They need to openly advocate for it.
Yeah.
So your point's taken, Gretchen. Obviously, what I said was in a certain context, but this needs to be spoken about in a much louder arena than what it's being spoken about, because a lot of people don't even understand nationally the problems that the industry is going through.
Mast is in the Cannabis Caucus with a few of the other names you mentioned, and meeting with him for 30 minutes, he was fantastic. I mean, I agree in terms of who would I pick to be a spokesman to make the big boom yikes headline today. Like he would be a powerful voice as a veteran, as someone who's in Florida, who takes sort of a pro-business, pro-industry, but also very common sense, sort of like, shouldn't veterans have access to medicine that can help them? Like, why are we still criminalizing it? Why are we still restricting that level of access? He would be my pick for best spokesman, and also just a level-headed, charismatic character as well. I mean, just a really good dude who I think could make a really common sense appeal. I would love it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we lost AC, and this is getting a little bit long in the tooth. It's becoming, I guess, a more debate on people's actual opinion on the viability of the lawmakers versus that. But I mean, we ran through the headlines. If anybody has any questions or any of the concerns that are like pressing issues around the industry, would be more than happy to answer those. I think we're going to have to probably have Gretchen on next week to talk about the viability of the lawmakers that are supporting the industry. But if not, I'd say we get to let's get into mic drop, as it is Friday, and take it out from there.
Yeah, I would love that. All right.
Arns, take it away.
Drugs. We all know what we think about drugs. We're against them. We're against people pushing them on our kids. We're against having our property stolen or having ourselves and our loved ones assaulted by those who abuse or deal with them. We're against being endangered by vehicles operated by those under the influence of them. We're against anyone abusing them and the consequent loss of person and talents. We're even against anyone using them, except for the ones we use, or the ones that are legal, or the ones that are prescribed by a doctor. So sure, are we of this conventional wisdom, floating from personal to social to moral wisdom, that being against drugs has become a last political absolute, a touchstone of political correctness, a proof requiring no proof. I too am against pushing, against crime, and against driving under the influence, and against the social and personal harm that substance abuse causes. But I am also against the failure to accept reality, the failure to grasp reality, and to direct our actions and expectations in accord with it is the definition of insanity. Yeah. The reality here is that human beings have always used intoxicating substances and will continue to do so. 10 to 15% of those who use illegal drugs get into trouble, about the same percentage that get into trouble with alcohol, gambling, sex, or automobiles. The substances themselves rise and fall from favor over the centuries. The same beverages and herbs and crystals touted as elixirs and condemned as scourges. Their medical acceptance and legal status ever changing. In the early 18th century England, for example, the alleged cause of lower class violence and sure path to depravity was drinking coffee. Throughout, we have continued to attribute to the drugs themselves the power of good and evil, to describe them as if they had human volition, and thus to justify or deny responsibility for our own actions. It's the liquor talking. Because drugs continue to be romanticized for proponents and opponents alike, we continue to not see them, their use, or the trade in them clearly. No matter what policy we choose, drug use will be with us forever. I believe that the guiding principle of drug abuse control should be to reduce the harm to us as individuals, as a people, and as a society as much as possible, the greatest good for the greatest number. However, the approach we have thus chosen as a nation is a law enforcement strategy enshrined in the recent decades as the war on drugs. This goes on. I just wanted to read that. It was a piece that my dad wrote in 1993. He was actually the research director, coordinating counsel on substance abuse for the city of Boston between 1975 and 79. So he does have some credentials. It goes on to describe exactly what the harm of the war on drugs and a suggested policy. I'll post the whole thing on my Twitter account. But it's the fact that it was written in 1993 and it feels like it could have been written yesterday is the most telling part of this. It's just, law enforcement prohibition doesn't work. He was saying this.
No, it doesn't.
Get with it. And so it's nice to see some common sense be floated out there. And hopefully common sense prevails.
It would be nice. Common sense is something that we need a lot of moving forward. I feel like common sense is coming back into the equation, and let's see how things transpire. I think with that, let's roll into the weekend, everybody. Thank you very much for viewing. Gretchen, hopefully we can have you on next Wednesday or Friday and debate the nuances of the comm strategy, I guess, for the politicians that are up in Washington. By all means, don't get my message misconstrued that I'm trying to discount what they're doing. I greatly appreciate them supporting the industry, and I greatly appreciate them co-sponsoring bills and adding to the momentum that we're kind of perpetuating as an industry. But like I said, I mean, I would love to see just it being more public and being louder, because cannabis isn't something that you need to be afraid to support anymore. It's national, it's a majority, and it's not going anywhere. So it needs to be spoken about in the public arena, just like it is with different public policy facets of the government. And I think with that, Arns, let's take us out for the weekend. Everybody have a great weekend. Shad and I will be back on Monday, and it's going to be a doubleheader episode with the CEO of LeafLink, talking about the wholesale market as well as the retail market as it relates to prices of flower. And we'll have Peter Sack on from Chicago Atlantic on fall. Actually, Peter Sack from Chicago Atlantic will be on from the top of the hour. And then we'll go into the wholesale and the retail market as it relates to the price of flower nationally with the CEO of LeafLink. So Monday should be a good episode to kick off the week.
Nice.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
Love you, Dad. Miss you.
Hey, everybody. Stay connected here. The latest Traded Black podcast. Another great episode under the belt. What'd y'all think? Do you like what we had to say? Please leave any comments below. And as usual, make sure to subscribe to our Baked In newsletter. Check us out on Apple and Spotify. And if you haven't done so already, make sure to smash that like button, leave some comments, as I said before, and subscribe to our channel, because we wouldn't be here without you. Thanks again, everybody, for watching.